Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enterprise Universe. We are here with Dr. James Stalker, the founder and CEO of the Enterprise Universe. As you know, Dr. Stalker is an entrepreneur, inventor, philosopher, and eminent scientist. And today we are at an historic point in our journey because we're getting close to the end of our fundamentals aspect of our chats with Dr. Stalker, at least our first round of those. So today, Dr. Stalker, I think we're heading into the final stretch of our discussion about fundamentals. Is that correct?
That's right, Eamonn. I appreciate the introduction. We're going to be talking about the ninth fundamental, that's competitors, and how to deal with them. And then I will wrap up all of the 9 fundamentals we discussed so far. That's a good set of videos for anyone to understand and learn from. And as I pointed out before, you really have to learn all of these things together. That's when it's going to be really a powerful tool.
So I would say they need to do it in order, Dr. Stalker. I think it's very important to watch these videos in order if you possibly can, because the themes build on each other as you go along.
Absolutely. Remember the creek I was talking about early on?
Yes.
And there's a reason for the order too. So you cannot jump over something else and you fall into the creek. The idea is not to get wet or get dirty. So you have to follow them in sequence so you get to the other side of the creek. And now we are at the last fundamental, that's competitors.
Yes.
So what's the big deal about competitors? So here is what my philosophy on that is and why this is really restrictive for a lot of us. So competitors are a small segment of the entire population of people that we talked about. That's a huge fundamental. And then teased out of that are customers. That's another small segment. And we talked about, as an entrepreneur, how you deal with customers and then learn some behaviors there and use them toward everyone. So when I say everyone, that includes competitors too. So here's my philosophy on competitors, Eamonn. One of the big things that came out of this series of videos that we broadcasted so far. So one of the things that, in fact, that's the main thing that I want to put on a placard as an entrepreneur is, what's our goal is to make our customers' lives better. Okay, so that's really the fundamental thing that we're going after as entrepreneurs. So here is what it is. In an ideal world, if every competitor that we consider as competitors have the same goal, they are trying to make their customer lives better. We are trying to make our customer lives better. So if the customers happen to be the same for both of us, the competitors and us, what is really common there? The common thing is the goal to make their lives better. So in that sense, if a competitor has a better product than us, we have to work with them together. And at the same time, if we have a product that's better or a service that's better, then the competitors have to be open-minded about working with us. So that collaboration between competitors is really the big thing that we're going to try to emphasize today. So it's not competition when the goal for both the competitors is the same. So because the goal is making a customer's life better, you together work and then make the product better or the service better. So from that perspective, philosophically.
Which is why I think that's a fundamental reason why I think kind of the war metaphor doesn't work that great for business. Because if you take that viewpoint where the goal of business is to make the customer's life better, competition and conquest, the zero-sum game isn't really a very good metaphor for business. Although, even though business has been so influenced by strategic thinking as it relates to basically military affairs.
It is true, Eamonn. One of the things that we have come across time and again during these videos is the existing words are not adequate to explain what I'm trying to do. But I'm trying to do the best I can to to name them, all the 9 fundamentals we came up with. Actually, you're right about competitors in the regular sense no longer make sense, because once you have this higher goal of satisfying your customers, cooperation becomes
Yes,
really the center.
and I think the thing is, a lot of people think, when they think of the word competitor, they think enemy. It's like they're the enemy. Or what you're saying, no, that's just another stakeholder trying to make the customer's life better. And where it makes sense, wouldn't you want to work with your competitors? And I just think that's I think too, to be honest, the marketplace metaphor tends to be winning deals, and yes, I understand you do win deals against competition, but I guess one should celebrate any deal where the customer comes out the winner, and versus, that would be a more objective way of looking at if the customer's winning, we're happy. Whether you win the gig or not is irrelevant. The main thing is to satisfy the end needs of the customer, versus it's a mano a mano with the competition, with the knives out.
That's absolutely true. And also, Eamonn, you don't have to skimp on what you're trying to get back by doing this partnership or cooperation. It doesn't have to be that I get more, you get less. That's really not what it is. When we work together as competitors going forward, the customer gets more. You know what happens when a customer gets more?
They buy
He
more.
or she is going to give you more.
Yes.
That's just the way it is. That's the way it works, because we're solving their problems truly, not pushing something that we have. And as soon as somebody else does the same thing, we want to take their lunch away. Like I talked about, we hear all these cliches where, it's mine and it's not yours and all of that stuff. We don't really have to do that. But I'm saying this, Eamonn, the new game has to be understood with all the rules. Otherwise, it's not going to work. For example, we are going to be kind to our competitors, but our competitors are going to say, "Oh, these guys are, they are doing something else." No, it has to be understood by both parties. And that's why all competitors are not going to be ready to do this initially, but it's going to happen, because they are on a path, we know, down the road. We have to bring them back to square one. And as long as they understand they're not going to miss out on anything by coming back to square one and work with us, and their customers are going to be happier than ever before, that's really what we have to be able to do.
Maybe for those guys, we should call them product pushers or something instead of competitors. They're product pushers, because we wouldn't really consider them competitors. They're people trying to say, I don't know what the right word would be actually, to use for the non-competitors, if you will, the folks that are trying to influence the customer, perhaps not with the best intentions. I'm not sure that I'm not sure I have a name for that.
This is a weak substitute, but I would say facilitators.
Okay.
I would use, you're facilitating the solutions and products for the betterment of your customers. And again, Eamonn, none of the words that exist today, they are adequate to describe what I'm trying to say. But that comes pretty close to facilitating somebody's,
Yes.
lives better and so forth. So that's one thing. But I'll tell you this, and I want to get on to this because you pointed out a lot of times these big companies do this and they don't have this and that. And I'm going to tell you this, why I tried to stay away from that during those discussions. Here is why. There are some things that they're doing better than us, better than somebody else. So we have to be open to getting that done with them too. So that's one of the reasons why I don't want to take that attitude toward them, and that's really the point I was trying to make.
Yes, and as well as that, I think when I can be accused of them guys, those guys, those guys type thinking, of which obviously I've demonstrated quite a bit of that over these, isn't really very valuable, and I can see that them guys, it's like, who guys, what guys? We're talking about people we're talking about organizations with positives and negatives. But back to your point, we're talking about a lot of confusion out there too, Dr. Stalker, and perhaps that's the root of it. If we go on the assumption most people are well-intentioned, that's great, but if you're confused, the results may not add up to the intentions.
That is absolutely true. So none of what I've talked about so far, Eamonn, the recurring theme is it's not easy. So yeah. None of it is easy. It's very, very difficult to do, but it has to be done. Without doing it, one of the things that I talked about, unfogging that confusion is really only the way to save humanity. Okay, so think about that. If we don't unfog it, we're going to drown in our own shortcomings while messing with the humanitarian needs of everyone. So we really have to make sure unfogging that confusion is really the main thing that we have to focus on as competitors or as facilitators, maybe the word that we will use from now on going forward.
Which is really which is why I think philanthropic exercises have a hard time deploying their assets in maybe the optimal way, is because you need this clarity even in philanthropic work, not just all activities, not just commercial activities, need clarity and around these topics, because the do-gooder thing can lead to disaster as well, just as well as the guy. I think net negative isn't a function of intention or good guys versus bad guys. A lot of it's a function of confusion and just outcomes that are suboptimal, irrespective of what you're. Of course, things are worse if you've got bad intentions, but lots of good things aren't having the positive intentions or results, maybe because they don't have the clarity. And as you say, I'm a complete believer that this is a crucial time, and that without this clarity, we're going to face some significant challenges. We already are, potentially terminal challenges, as we've said. Which isn't funny, obviously, but it's kind of like, what can you do?
That's true, Eamonn. So good intentions are a great start, but you still have to have the ability to think through some things and come up with strategic plans and tactical plans, and plans are plans, but having the right people. Never forget people, doing the work for people. So don't get carried away by your technology and all of that stuff. I mean, that's great, but people are the ones that are going to be doing it. You have to be able to inspire them and guide them, lead them, while at the same time, ruthlessly, I use that word, I don't use it lightly because I don't really know how I can do that. But managing things has to be done really strictly while you're guiding someone with kindness. So that's a delicate balance that we have to achieve. And an example we took, a couple of times, it really says something, Eamonn. If I get upset with something that wasn't done, I don't have to be negative about you. I have to be negative about the thing. And when you and I think about the thing and work on that, while we have kindness to each other, that's really the fantastic way of doing business, not only with people within your organization, but anyone outside of it. And in that context, Eamonn, racism and bigotry and authoritarian tendencies, these are all going to collapse. They will be looked down upon as a waste of human energy, human effort, but that's all around us, and we really want to make sure that is not going to be the case going forward, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing all of this.
Right, to bring that. So then we've already started, I guess, on the recap of the 9 fundamentals there, Dr. Stalker. I know we've already hit a few of them just in our conversation as it relates to the competitor, which is not unusual because we typically touch on other fundamentals as we talk about prior fundamentals as we talk about a fundamental. Do you want to provide a kind of a quick little tour of the 9 fundamentals, and maybe just maybe give us again a quick, and this is how it all fits together, and this is what I really need you to start thinking about, or how, just gives a quick summary in 10 or 15 minutes. I know it's a lot, but I wonder if we could have a quick tour.
I think that's a great idea, Eamonn, because we're gonna kind of move on from this phase of our discussions and get into some technology and the leadaging, which is really a big thing, and the topics like capitalism and what Wall Street does and why stakeholders want to take the big stake. These things are going to be relevant to our discussions going forward, but I want to kind of finish this thing here. So here is the deal, Eamonn. I like everyone to become an entrepreneur. I really do, because I think we could make a lot of contribution when you are an entrepreneur. Because even if you employ 1 or 2 people, that's more than your own contribution to the world. So if you want to be an independent entrepreneur by yourself, that's great too, because you're not depending on anyone. But in the likelihood that you're going to make 1 or 2 jobs available to others, that's really a great thing to do in the world. So that's the backdrop of what I'm doing. But once you make that decision, you want to be an entrepreneur, I want you to think about what the purpose of your interest in that business is. So that's the main thing. It's a cornerstone that kind of unravels everything else from there. So we talked about that. For the enterprise universe, it's spreading goodness through innovation. Innovation is a broad term. It could be social, economic, technical, or even something that we haven't thought of. But that's really where the innovation comes. And from there, you got the products and services with the goodness in heart to help everyone around the world. So that's the purpose. But as soon as you have the purpose, you need to have a concrete vision in terms of a number of, say, revenue or whatever, number of employees and so forth. So I challenge the entrepreneur, once they have the purpose written down in 4, 5, 6 words, think about the vision too. $2 million in 4 years, whatever that might be, a small number, large number, it doesn't matter. But you got to have a concrete number for that, because that helps you minimize the number of possibilities of pathways that you have to choose to get there. So that's our 3rd fundamental. So when you have the pathways constrained by your purpose and your vision, because those are the ones that are really driving your pathways, then you will go to the growing phase. You are going to go beyond yourself as a one-man band. That's the recipe of people. Number of people that you have in your organization is telling you what type of people that you need to achieve your vision and the pathways that you've chosen in alignment with your purpose. So that's really the recipe of your business, but you really have to understand all of that before you put it together. But then I draw the focus from the group development here to the entrepreneur again. The reason I do that is, once you wrote something down and you got the vision, you got the pathways, and you got your people, it's not a done deal. You still have to go back and fine tune it over a period of time. And that's why I call the next fundamental, know thyself. You really have to know yourself. No matter how much we think we know about ourselves, we really don't. We need to know a lot more, because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, as I was saying, I thought I knew everything about myself and everything about the physical world too. To an extent, I was right. But there was so much else that I did not know about the social dimension and everything else. So that's why I emphasize the fact that we have to really constantly think about ourselves, and then feed it back to your purpose and your vision and your pathways and so forth. So those are the first 5 fundamentals. It's really about the entrepreneur and their vision and how they want to take this business further. And then we jump into the actual meat potatoes of the business. That's the back 4, where we're talking about customers. Obviously, you have the people to deal with customers, and you have the technology to develop your products and services. But dealing with customers has to be done in a manner that's more of a discovery process than pushing the stuff that you have onto them. I do not like that. It's not even a good way to do business, because in the end you want to solve a customer's problems, but without understanding their problems, Eamon, you're not going to be able to solve them. That's why canned products and advertising and pushing everything really has to be minimized to elimination. As a matter of fact, if we could do that through discovery, spend the time, have more people dedicated to that, understanding their needs first, and then come back to your laboratory and figure out what the needs were, and then put your solutions together. But one thing I point out, the reason why people have canned products in general is because they don't have the ability to customize. They only have certain ability, and that's why they cannot go beyond that. And that's why they would never say, give it to me, tell me what your problem is, I will try to solve it. They are not able to do that, but that's really what you have to do. And that's part of this know thyself, as I talk about. So I will take a little break there. Eamon, it seems like you have a couple questions.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I was thinking about there was that it's not clear to me that customers, if you don't know yourself, you don't know your needs. So on the assumption that customers may not be always as self-aware as maybe they could be, they may need help in discovering what their true needs are. And that we need, and this was one of the things I was just thinking about. Do you agree with that as a way, as a, like, this whole idea of discovering needs isn't just asking the customer what he wants. It's actually, you have to dig a bit deeper to get to the true needs, given that the customer may need some analysis of his own situation in order to figure out what his true needs are.
That's absolutely true. They may not even know what technical solutions are available to them. Mm-hmm. They usually don't have that understanding as to how to bring them forth. But that's where you have to, as an entrepreneur with the integrity, not with the desire to push something to them, but really truly understand what their needs are and fill that role where you're saying, advising them, okay, Mr. Customer, your need is this, but you quite don't understand what it means by this. So these are your options. They have to be able to understand that, and you have to be able to tell that more professionally and with the integrity that you need. And in my case, Eamon, I go a step further. Actually, I'm going to approach them with kindness, and I have to quickly tell them, hey, separate your needs from yourself, which is really like a crash course in that case. Not easy, because it's going to take some time for them, but as we get better with them, my approach to kindness and understanding their problems in a discovery manner, and then put the solutions together. So you are right about that. There is not an easy thing to do. It's a challenging problem, but that's why it presents a lot of opportunities also for the right entrepreneur.
Right. And I think, that, as you said, you got the first 5, and now we're into the first leg of the back straight, if you will. So right. You've got the customer as kind of the foundational concept of the back 4. How do the other 3 build on that idea?
Okay, so entrepreneur, essentially, if in the spectrum I talked about, from selfish people of human behavior to selfless behavior on the other end, entrepreneurs and customers fall in the middle of that spectrum. So if an entrepreneur wants to say, hey, I'm done, I know how to deal with my customer, I know how to discover, I know how to put my products together. If they don't want to go beyond that, that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But in this day and age, Eamon, no entrepreneur, no business really is works in vacuum. It has to be connected to the rest of the world. Like, for example, your community, your city and your county and your state and so forth. So you really have to develop these other skills above and beyond dealing with your customers. And that's the reason why I created a separate fundamental called people in general. That would be your personal friends and family and extended family and all of that. But what it does is this, Eamon, because you're developing a best behavior you could ever possibly can as an entrepreneur, because you have to, your livelihood depends on dealing with your customers. All I'm saying is you are a professional now, how to behave nicely. Think about that. You forced yourself to behave nicely because you're an entrepreneur. Before then, when you were an individual, you didn't have to. You didn't have to worry about anything else. You're just leading your own life, interacting as good as you can. But now you forced yourself. You stepped forward to become an entrepreneur. So you have those skills now you acquired. And I'm saying that you should use those skills and apply it to each and every one. And that's why this people fundamental becomes much of a broader perspective than just the customers alone. And in that people, Eamon, and we'll get to this, that's the last fundamental that we talked about, but your employees are part of that. Think about that. You have to deal with them, you have to be kind to them and all of that. Whatever philosophy you have in dealing with them, whatever you've learned as an entrepreneur from your customers, you really have to put that same behavior toward your employees and everyone else. So that's really the people's fundamental. And for me, that's kindness. Kindness in the way I describe. So it's really not truly the way you would think of kindness, where you're sacrificing a lot and you really don't have any desires of your own, which is really not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is kindness when you separate people from their thinking or things and there's no attachment. Leading them with kindness makes a lot more sense in that case. And then dealing with things really firmly, I call ruthlessly for a better word. But when you're able to do both, you're actually going to achieve the leadership or leading qualities that we're aspiring to have. So that's the seventh fundamental, and and then we will go to learning. That's the eighth fundamental. So here is what it is. As a business, now you have people, customers, employees, and your communities and everyone else, and you know how to deal with them because you forced yourself or you professionally learned to behave better. Now, this organization has more than the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur could learn by himself or herself through self-learning, that's knowing thyself. But as an organization, you have to learn together. That's really what I mean by learning. That's the fundamental, not for the entrepreneur himself or herself, but the entire organization learning together, helping each other. Mentoring becomes the center point, not competition, who is ahead, who is not ahead. And don't get me wrong, some people are going to make more money within the enterprise universe compared to somebody else, but they're rewarded for the things that they do in this new environment. For example, mentoring is looked at as an important asset, owned, shown by any employee within the enterprise universe than somebody does more sales than somebody else. So we're not going to encourage that kind of competition, but cooperation and mentoring, because the end goal really is making our customer lives better. Once we understand that, everything else falls in place, and that's what learning is all about, Eamon, within the enterprise universe. So as a business, you could put the learning tools together that's appropriate for your business, but don't ever skimp on the expenditures or the spending on learning tools within your organization, because the moment you stop learning as an organization, that's really when the downfall starts. So that's why I cannot emphasize enough how learning is important as an organization. They may not be able to do like what we do within the enterprise universe, but you still have to have a, uh, a, a way that's defined for your business and that works for your business within your budget, but don't ever have stop having learning sessions and all of the tools that are needed within your organization.
I actually, one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking, and this hadn't really meshed with me, was that another linkage between the first set of 5 principles and the back 4 principles is that there is, because you have this, you've said it on several occasions and it didn't really click until now, about your external behavior, like it forces you to behave well. So when you the first 5 are kind of somewhat internal, and then basically as you engage with the external environment now, that forces you to put them into practice and actually live them. So to us, in a sense, it reinforces the habit of the first 5 foundations, and that it is that the ongoing need to be on your best behavior, to live the principles, is what will take it from talk to action, if you will. And I had never, when you initially said that, I didn't quite connect with what you were saying, but I think I understand a little better now. Is that a true statement about what I just said there?
It is, Eamonn, and that's a great observation. So in the first 5 kind of develops you. You develop yourself first to the extent where you realize you have the surplus and you realize that giving is the way to go in entrepreneurship. And then you're learning about yourself constantly and refining your purpose, refining your vision and so forth. But then what? As a business, you don't stop there. You still have to develop the teams and deal with customers and people in general in your community and so forth. You're right about that, but the set of fundamentals you acquired during the first 5, first phase of it, for the first 5 fundamentals, that's going to bolster everything else that you do. So without that, as a matter of fact, Eamonn, I will tell you this after I finish the last one, competitors. Competitors are not your enemies. They are your friends. It's just a matter of time before they become your friends. And believe it or not, Eamonn, most of the folks that are out there now, they will get rid of their thinking after watching what we're talking about here. Certainly after how we deal with our customers and they learn from it, they're going to shed some of that baggage that they have about, okay, if I win, if I lose, that guy is going to win, and all of that. They're going to shed that. So competitors, the way we look at them is going to be different.
We love you guys. We love you guys out there, competitors. So no, that's good. I think that's really profound, and it's got to, everything is it depends on how you look at it. There's no eternal truth. It's like you can take something like competitor and turn it on its head by thinking about it in a different way. And I think that's interesting, because a lot of these words are on their heads in the context of the 9 fundamentals. And I think that's very interesting. It's very interesting that the word can be used to this way, but it's a precise and not necessarily the common usage of the term. It's a much more nuanced way of thinking about it. And certainly sometimes it makes me laugh, to be honest, just because it's like, wow, I've never thought about it that way. It's kind of like makes me scratch my head a bit. So
well, I tell you this, Eamonn, the words that we're building for the language within the enterprise universe, the existing words are not adequate. Unfortunate. I'm only trying to pick the best word that's closer.
And I'm sure you have the same problem in your innovation in science. I'm sure you have the same problem with, even within relatively precise language of science. I'm sure even there, with the Stalker method, you're further refining what one would expect to be fairly well-defined words and further refining them because the general meaning isn't there, so I'm sure it's not the only area where we'll have this problem of having to redefine the lexicon before we move too much into the conversation, because otherwise we'll miss each other.
I agree, and you're right on about the science. As a matter of fact, some of the well-accomplished scientists, they have trouble understanding or totally grasping what the Stalker method is, even when I explain to them over and over and over. Not because they are not smart people, it's just that they really do not know how to let go of their current thinking.
Yes.
So
Which is why, so as you said, sometimes you're better off with someone who knows little, who is open to learning, than someone who knows a lot, who may not be open to learning, because it's about scaling the new heights, and being too full of what you know can be a bit of a problem.
And that's why I was saying early on in our conversations, I would rather take a person that has the desire or the drive to learn than somebody who has learned a lot but stopped growing.
So now I know why. Now I know why you hang out with me. You want the guys who don't know a lot but are willing to learn, and that's fine. I'm in that category.
No, so, I'm not pointing to you, Eamonn.
Yeah, I'm only kidding, but no, but it's true. I look. The thing is, it's good. It's good to know nothing if you have the right attitude about it, and you're open to new things. I must say, I find it some stressful sometimes not knowing. And it's kind of like, I tend not to think about it as a good thing, but that's probably just a personal thing I need to work on, which is, hey, it's good not to know, because that means I might be open to some new influence, versus, oh, I know a lot, and then basically I'm off on the wrong track. So maybe we can take some of this anxiety that people have, like me, about not knowing things, and turn it into actually a positive thing, which is, hey, we've got an opportunity now to learn new things, and that's and I think psychologically it's exciting to learn new things, and one feels good. So I think there's a lot of positive reasons why people get excited about learning, because it's whatever chemicals in our brain reward us for learning stuff.
Well, I'll tell you the same, and to ease your anxiety there, that I learned all this. What am I going to do? No, I'll tell you this. Once you realize you have a delta and you are willing to go to step one, that's the major effort right there. Not the climbing itself. That's, even though that sounds like a lot of work, it's not. When you realize it, you have the willingness to get to step one. And that's why it's so important that we understand that first. Because climbing that mountain is really not as hard as getting to that step one.
Which I think Dr. Stalker gets back to this, it's like the 9 foundations. It's trusting the process, not the what's in your mind. In other words, if we have a good process for learning, if we have a good process for growing, if we have a good and if we trust in them, we can get there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because frankly, the old kit in the bag might actually be luggage, and we might actually have to leave it at the train station, so to speak, before we climb the mountain. Because if you try and climb the mountain with all the baggage, chances are you're not going to get up the whole hill. I'm guessing. So I think that's why, focus. I really like we're focusing on the process, and I think I'd be very interested in future sessions learning about how you approach problems, just so we can kind of, ground ourselves on how to do it properly, and not worry so much about what worry about that we learn the proper method for going forward. And that, I think, would be very liberating for us, because it kind of gets us off, we're then in a less stressful state. It's just, hey, I've got to learn the method, I've got to practice the method, and if I learn and practice the method and have faith in it, the results will come. And I think that's a lot less stressful than I've got to have 1,000 facts in my head, and hopefully I'll pull the right one out at the right moment and get the answer.
No, I'll tell you this,
It seems
Eamon.
to be kind of like the expert. Oh yeah, I'm gonna rummage around in there and hopefully I can pull a rabbit out of my hat. You know.
But it's actually true, Eamon. It gets better once you do this once or twice.
I we
It
need
gets
some
so
practice.
easy. And but I'll emphasize this to Eamon. You cannot actually do one fundamental and not the other. You
Yeah.
really
Right.
have to have all of them together.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
It's like an orchestra. It's like you can't play, soccer with, without your laces tied. You got to have the boots and you got to have the football and you got to have the training and you got to have the psychology. It's like you got to put it all together in order to actually get through the process. So I totally get that, and I think so many times we engage in entrepreneurism, if to use that term, with only half the clubs, or we forget we don't have a putting. We can't, we don't have all the clubs. I think that would be hey, you got to have a club for the whole course. Otherwise, you're, teeing off with the putter. That's not going to get you very far.
It doesn't, and it all starts with purpose, Eamon, and that's why I emphasize that a lot. And it's worth doing it. And take my own example. As smart as I think I am,
Mhm.
as smart as I think I was before I started all of this, took me many, many years to get to the purpose, and then unraveling everything else around it. If I didn't have my purpose right, I would have said, hey, I want to use this for my own competitive advantage. But that's really not what competition is really about, or your entrepreneurship is about. So as soon as I realized it, as soon as I put them all together, I said, I have to give it to everyone else. So though they don't have to waste years and years of their time, and they may never get there, actually.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
So
if we don't have each other pulling each other up, we're hardly going to get there. And I'm glad, Dr. Stalker, that you're giving us your time to help us climb this mountain. And I really appreciate your generosity in giving this time to me and to the listeners to understand these what I think are very important messages. And frankly, we all need to get on the bandwagon pretty quick here because we've got some challenges and we need to get out there and start rising to the challenge. And I think the foundations and spreading goodness through innovation and these fundamentals are going to be critical to us really creating a much better world not for ourselves and for those yet to come.
I appreciate the thought there, Eamon. I totally appreciate it. So I will tell you this. I have been talking about leading for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But the more I think about this, Eamon, this leading concept could be for world peace. When countries, among country leaders working together, and we see the turmoil now, everybody's for themselves, and I'm ahead, you're not ahead, and all of that. Really, when you are unable to treat your own people right, then what makes you think you're going to treat the rest of the world right?
And I think, Dr. Stalker, your last comment about competition, in world affairs, we've got to move away from the concept of competition and to the concept of winning means helping our people do better. And if China can help us make our people do better, if the US can help Europeans do better, surely that should be the goal of and we should get rid of this world global competition and replace it with global facilitation, to use your term. And I think they sound like crazy, but I think within the context of what you've laid out, they're rational. In and of themselves, they just connote a growth away from living in a kind of the games, throwing out the games and upping our game towards purpose and towards people and towards knowing thyself. All of these things enable us at the country level to move beyond competition and to focus on well-being for all of us. And I think that's the thing is that those concepts sound like crap or craziness unless you build it up with all the fundamentals. When they sit at the pinnacle, yes, I can see it. If it just sits out there, it doesn't make any sense. So I think that's very interesting, Dr. Stalker, that you brought that up at kind of this last round about how, you know, by bringing us full circle, it kind of it could add up to basically just thinking about things just completely differently. But before you start thinking about changing your attitude to competition, you got to think about the other 8 foundational things first.
That's absolutely true, Eamonn. So, hopefully that's what we're going to do.
Right.
That's our goal here, and we have a great start already, Eamonn. And with all of your questions, timely inquiries into my concepts and so forth, really highlighted a lot of these things, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, thanks. Hopefully I'm channeling our listeners and viewers to some of the key questions, and hopefully one of these days we'll get to the point where we can have live Q&As. I think that's going to be good. But for right now, the users, the listeners have to, I'm proxying for them in terms of some of the questions they may have for you, Dr. Stalker. So we'll be back in a couple of days. And again, thanks a lot, Dr. Stalker, for your valuable time. Another fascinating 45 minutes. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. God bless.